What we have here is continuing how to factor. So the next couple days, according to our paperwork, is day 5 and day 6. They are both review of the methods that we have covered so far. So the 4 methods that we have, how to factor. Step 1, we need to see if we have any greatest common factor. If there is, we're going to divide it off. Then, based on the format of what we have left, we are either going to be dealing with grouping, difference of 2 perfect squares, or how to factor trinomials. So grouping is when we have 4 terms. Difference of 2 perfect squares is if we are subtracting 2 perfect squares. And then trinomials means we have 3 terms. So depending on the number of terms we have in a problem is going to dictate which of the remaining 3 terms we have left. So if I look at this first problem, m squared plus 13m minus 30, step 1, do we have a common factor? Variable, numbers, there's no common factor. So now what we look as the number of terms. So we have 1, 2, 3 terms, meaning I am going to try and factor this as a trinomial. So again, I'll do it the way I prefer it. If you prefer the X box, you can look back at the previous day and see how to do the X box. Watch the video again and look at the notes. So m squared plus 13m minus 30. I prefer the fact that if I can factor this, this means I end up with 2 sets of parentheses. The first term in each one is going to multiply to m squared. So how do I do that? Well, the only way I can get m squared is if I do m times m. Next thing I have to look at are my numbers. So in parentheses, I'm going to have 2 numbers. And they have to do 2 things. They are going to have to multiply to be negative 30. And they have to add to positive 13. So what we are going to do is come up with factors of 30. And then see which ones we're going to deal with. So 30 we can get as 30 times 1, 15 times 2, 10 times 3, or 6 times 5. So out of these 4 pairs, it's going to be much easier to figure out which one is going to get 13. Now, we have to be careful because we have to multiply to negative 30 and add to a positive 13. So if I look at 30 plus 1, that gives me 31. 30 minus 1 is 29. So we're not dealing with that. 15 plus 2 gives me 17. 15 minus 2 can give me positive 13. So this one checks out. 10 plus 3 also gives me 13. So that also checks out. 10 minus 3 gives me 7. 6 times 5, or 6 plus 5 is 11 versus 1, so that's out. Now the question becomes, which of these 2 will I choose? Well, we know we have to multiply to be negative 30. Now the only way I can get a negative when I multiply is a negative times a positive. So the question becomes, which one will I end up with a positive 13? So if we look at negative 10 plus 3, I get negative 7. If I do it the other way, negative 3 plus 10, I get a positive 7. So that's not what I can use. So 10 and 3 are out based on that. So question becomes 15 and 2. Which one is the positive? Which one is the negative? Well, the little trick is, depending on what the sign in my problem is, the bigger number that we pick is going to get it. So we chose 15 and 2. So because our middle term is positive, that means the bigger number that we have to put in will also be positive. So 15 is going to get plus, and then 2 will be minus. So negative 2 times 15 gives me the negative 30. Negative 2 plus 15 gives me a positive 13. So we check out with m minus 2 times m plus 15. Now number 2, there is no common factor because it's 4, 12, and 5. There is no common factor between 4 and 5, so we can't pick that. So I actually cross it off and put something else. So whatever I gave you in the notes, you'll do that one. If I move on to number 3, 6x plus 18, notice we're only dealing with 2. We're not dealing with a trinomial. We don't have multiple terms. So 6x plus 18, the only thing I'm going to check for is a common factor at this point. So we'll look for a common factor between 6 and 18, which gives us 6. So this means we can divide both of these by 6. So when I pull it off, 6 comes off to the side. Whatever I have left goes in parentheses. 6 divided by 6 is 1, so 1x. And then 18 divided by 6 will give me plus 3. And again, you can always use the calculator to divide it off. So once we divide off a common factor, we look to see if what's inside parentheses is anything besides, is anything from a difference of 2 perfect squares, grouping, or trinomial. There's only 2 terms we're adding, so we are all set in this problem. 6 times x plus 3. Number 4, we have 25x squared minus 100. So again, 2 terms. So first thing we check for is a common factor. So math num around to number 9, GCD, 25 comma 100. And we can see that we can divide a 25 from both terms in our problem. So again, we divide off a 25. What we have left will go inside a set of parentheses. 25 divided by 25 is just 1, so we have 1x squared. And then we're subtracting in our problem. So 100 divided by 25 gives me 4. So we have x squared minus 4 inside parentheses. Now we have to check to make sure that we're done. We look at the format. So there's only 2 terms, meaning I'm only going to look to see if we have a difference of 2 perfect squares. It's not a trinomial because there's only 2 terms. Same with grouping. Grouping, we need 4 terms and there's only 2. So the only possible option we have is a difference of 2 perfect squares. So the question becomes, do we have it? Well, we're subtracting, so there's the difference. So do we have 2 perfect squares? Well, x squared is definitely a perfect square. Is 4 a perfect square? And again, to check it, we can always take the square root of the number we're dealing with. So square root of 4, if I get a solid number, it means it is. So we get 2. So we do have a difference of 2 perfect squares. So with difference of 2 perfect squares, again, I'm not doing anything with 25. When I factor it down, I end up with 2 sets of parentheses. What goes inside when it comes to a difference of 2 perfect squares? One is plus, the other is minus, and we take the square root of both terms. So square root of x squared is just x, and then square root of 4 we just found to be 2. So we have 25 times x plus 2 times x minus 2. And this format is the same for day 6. So just follow this video to go along with number 6. Again, day 6, we got the 4 factoring methods, and we just use it to figure out where to go and how to factor our problems. Anything where it did not have a common factor like we did in number 2, I swapped it out or crossed it off. Whichever method you prefer for the trinomials, you can always look back at the previous video where it deals with factoring trinomials. And that is all the different factoring methods to cover.